Okay, now we're going to look at question 3a. Describe the adjustments in the production possibilities curves in each of the following situations for the Canadian economy. Make sure your answers include graphical explanations. So for part I, the economy moves from full employment into a deep recession. So if I create a production possibilities frontier that has capital and consumption goods, and I note we're bending production possibilities frontier. If I'm at full employment, then I'm somewhere on the curve, so perhaps a point like this. Moving to a deep recession doesn't decrease my ability to produce goods and services, so it doesn't actually affect the production possibilities frontier in itself. It just means that I'm moving inside the frontier to a position that represents a deep recession. In part II, the economy makes great strides in eliminating discrimination. Probably the similar situation in that if you have discrimination, it means that there are certain employees of certain races perhaps or gender who aren't able to work in the best possible fields for their talents. So again, if we're reaching our possibilities, then we're already doing everything we can to produce as much as we can. And so if we are making great strides in eliminating discrimination, we're moving from one point inside the production possibilities frontier, and perhaps if we've completely eliminated discrimination and we're at full employment, perhaps then we're making it all the way to the outside of our production possibilities frontier. For question B, given the products below and the events that affect them, indicate what happens to demand, supply, equilibrium quantity, and equilibrium price. Identify the determinant of demand and supply that causes the shifts. Make sure that your answers include a graphic explanation. So part I, for new homes, so I'm going to label my diagram the market for new homes. And notice I haven't even read what's happening, but I'm going to draw my demand and supply curves. So downward sloping demand curve, upward sloping supply curve. This is my equilibrium quantity. This is my equilibrium price. The average income falls as the economy moves into a recession. Well, if people's incomes are going down, new homes would be what we would consider to be a normal good. So a decrease in income would result in a decrease in demand. So demand curve shifts to the left. And the second part of this question says productivity of home construction workers and builders increases. So these workers are becoming more productive. That lowers costs. It means they can produce more, and that results in an increase in the supply. And an increase, again, is a rightward shift. Okay, so we have increased productivity, and that's going to result in an increase in supply. And so we have both of these things, a decrease in demand and an increase in supply. They both cause a decrease in the equilibrium price. And as I've drawn it in this diagram, it really looks like there's very little change in the equilibrium quantity, but that would depend on how much I shifted the curves. If I shifted supply more than demand, then I'd have an increase in quantity. If I shifted the demand more than the supply, I'd have a decrease in quantity. And so there's no way to tell whether the quantity is going to increase or decrease. And so we've got here a decrease in demand, an increase in supply, a decrease in the equilibrium price, and an indeterminate or undetermined change in the equilibrium quantity. Now for part II, we've got the market for tobacco. And again, I'm simply going to start by drawing my demand and supply curves. I haven't even looked at the questions or tried to answer them. Downward sloping demand, upward sloping supply. There's my equilibrium quantity. There's my equilibrium price. And it says the government cuts a subsidy to tobacco farmers. Well, if you're reducing the subsidy, you're essentially increasing the farmer's costs. So this has to do with production. So we have an increase in costs, and that's going to result in a decrease in supply. A decrease in supply is a leftward shift of the supply curve. And the second part of that question is more people quit smoking. Well, this has to do with people's preferences, so this is obviously a decrease in the demand because fewer people want to smoke. So we have a decrease in the demand curve. That's a leftward shift. So our new equilibrium is here. Both a decrease in supply and a decrease in demand result in a decrease in quantity, so we know 100% the quantity is going to decrease. But we don't really know what's going to happen to the price. That depends, again, if I shift supply more than demand or vice versa. So we have a decrease in demand, a decrease in supply, a decrease in the equilibrium quantity, and an undefined change in price.